Welcome in as another edition of the On the Mic podcast. And this time it didn't take a year and a half or even longer to get him back on the podcast. Although we were strong in COVID last time he was on the show. And I guess because we're getting somewhat out of it, he graced me with this incredible honor of having the studio background behind him. He is the busiest man in MMA, the busiest man in the sports media world. He is my good friend, Ariel Helwani. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? How's everything? Good to be back on.
Yeah, I'm
As
good.
I'm
I'm
going to
good.
move
And
my
I'm
computer this way so
I'm
that
repping New York. So
Oh, look at you. Are you on the bandwagon?
no, I've been a fan ever since the Mellow days. Really, I mean, let me go back. I grew up here in Chicago. Everyone was a Jordan fan.
Yeah.
My aunt lived in New York City in Manhattan. She was always talking about the Knicks. And as I started getting out of the Jordan days, I became an Allen Houston fan.
Ah,
And so Allen Houston, and then Marbury, and then Curry, and then
yeah.
all that leading through. Once Melo got there, I kind of bled orange and blue, but kind of slowly traject over. People think I'm crazy to live in the city Jordan created and be a Knicks fan, but it is what it is.
Listen, it's a good time to be a Knicks fan. I'd say it's a good time to be a Bulls fan as well. Obviously, they didn't make the playoffs or the play-in, but I think they have a really young, nice nucleus. Obviously, Zach LaVine coming back was huge towards the end of the year. Kobe White, Vucevic. I mean, I think they have a nice foundation. Billy Donovan's a great coach. So I wouldn't begrudge you if you were a Bulls fan, but obviously I think that you've made the right choice. You've hitched your wagon to the right horse, so to speak.
I absolutely have. Although I will say I wasn't on the Julius Randle signing at first.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people weren't.
Yeah, he proved me wrong. And once Tibbs came in, I was like, I think this is going to be a great team. But I'm going to ask you the biggest question that everybody wants to know about Ariel Helwani. Are we going to see some basketball playoff coverage from you?
I don't know if that's the biggest question, but I appreciate it. So far, I don't know. Usually, they have a great team there, and I'm not part of the regular rotation, and I shouldn't be, because there are people who it's their full-time job doing that. And so I'm just happy when they throw me a bone once every couple months. They did tell me last year that I was going to be a part of the playoff rotation, but then of course everything shut down in the bubble, right, and that was totally different. So thus far, I can't say that I am. It would be great to do a Knicks game, but thus far I have not been given my assignment, and the playoff schedule isn't even out there yet. So who knows, what's going to happen, but they have an amazing team of people over there who do the job that I do. And so I don't want to take anyone's spot. If they need someone in a pinch, 11th hour, whatever, I'm happy to do it. But I'm definitely aware of my spot in the pecking order, so to speak.
I thought you were going to de Blasio me and come into this interview with a Knicks jersey on over a nice shirt and a hat. I thought we were going to start some New York wars here.
No, I've retired the jerseys. I feel like you reach a certain age and you shouldn't wear them anymore. Or you can wear them, but it has to be of someone who's older than you. It's weird to see like a 40-year-old man wearing a 19-year-old's jersey, in my opinion. But different strokes for different folks.
Where I work for Liz the Hat Company, and we sell jerseys, and the NBA throwbacks are the biggest wave.
Oh, those are the best. Wait, what store do you work at?
At Lids.
Oh, Lids, legendary. I love Lids.
Yeah. So all the throwback Mitchell and Nesses are like the wave from the 13-year-olds to the 35-year or 40 sometime year olds.
Yeah, so those are okay. I am down with those, but I always love going into Lids to see if they have Expos hats. I don't even want to buy them. I just like to know that they're there.
I've got some in my store. Every day I walk in, I'm like, Ariel would appreciate this. But awesome. Crazy weekend at UFC 262, and honestly, something I didn't expect. Charles Oliveira, I thought he was done in round one. I think most of the MMA world thought he was done in round one. Kind of speaks to his character, though, and a guy who's a part of the ESPN broadcast now on Fight Nights is Dean Thomas, and he was on his SiriusXM radio show yesterday, and he said, when you think about the story of Charles Oliveira, you couldn't be happier for anyone in the world to have a belt. Do you kind of agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, no one speaks badly of this guy, and when you consider that he debuted in 2010 in the UFC, and when you consider that his career started in the UFC 10-8 and 1 no contest, And he just appears to be such a great guy, still lives in his favela back home in Brazil, does a lot of charitable work there. And we're starting to learn more about the stuff that he does back home. And we're also starting to learn more about the struggles that he had as a kid. I mean, how could you be, even if you're a Michael Chandler fan, deep down, I don't know how you cannot be somewhat happy for this guy. And, covering him for a long time and seeing his ups and downs and seeing him, fail to find the right weight class and missing weight 4 times in the span of, 4 years, 5 years. Really an amazing story. And then when you consider that he's just 31 and that this isn't someone, he broke Michael Bisping's record for most fights needed to win a UFC title, but Bisping was at the very end of his career when he won the belt. This guy, I mean, he could conceivably have 10 more years left in his MMA career. And so that's an amazing thing as well. So yeah, this is one of the best stories that I've seen in quite some time. And I'm certainly happy for him. And I haven't seen anyone else who isn't happy for him.
Yeah, I think if Conor and Dustin Poirier weren't running it back in the trilogy in July here, I think there could be an argument made for a rematch between Chandler and Oliveira. But I also think that there's a narrative that Michael Chandler shouldn't have gotten this title shot. And then look what happened. He could have closed the show in round 1. Why do you think if we'll say the casual fan is kind of reading Michael Chandler's UFC career so far the wrong way?
I'll be honest, I haven't heard that, but I'm sure it's out there with all the different opinions out there. I think that that's a kind of silly thing. I mean, the guy was literally seconds away from winning the fight, starched Dan Hooker in his debut. Chandler's story is incredible. And the thing you have to know about Chandler is he's no spring chicken. He's not like some, stud. He's not Paulo Costa in the sense that he was undefeated, he gets a title shot, and now you're wondering how he's going to rebound. This guy has been to the top of the mountain. He has won multiple titles. I don't care if it's Bellator, one championship. I don't care where it is. You win a title, you reached a certain mountaintop, right? And he has lost that belt. He has stumbled before. He's fought at Madison Square Garden. He has stumbled there. And look at what he's done. And he's still, in his mid-30s. And he still is, he's in phenomenal shape and all that stuff. So I have no doubts about Michael Chandler. Now, does he get back to this point? It's going to be tough because that division is so darn good with so many great fighters just, chomping at the bit. But I have no doubt that he could get back in there and win a couple more. And, you're right back in the title picture. So if anyone is no one has roughed up Oliveira like that in quite some time. And he was, like I said, literally seconds away. And maybe if he stands him up, if he doesn't go in his guard and try to finish him on the ground, maybe he does finish him. And so maybe that's a mistake that he's going to have to think about for quite some time. But yeah, this is no indictment on Michael Chandler. I thought he came off looking quite good.
Yeah. I think it was in a loss. I think it was a win for Michael Chandler moving forward. But we see behind you Ariel and the Bad Guy, and then you have the Helwani podcast, and then you have DC and Helwani, and you're dropping the hottest of hot takes in 2021. And you did call McGregor Poirier the #1 contender fight later this summer. But I've got to ask, we know Conor, and we know now Dustin is rightfully so chasing these major paydays. I think obviously no matter who comes out of that, there's going to be a big payday to fight Charles Oliveira. But do you think we could see an instance in which no matter who wins, that contract negotiations could get caught up a little bit and we would see Oliveira fight somebody else first before the winner of McGregor Poirier?
I mean, look, in this sport, crazy things happen, but I don't know how you deny Dustin Poirier. I mean, like if Dustin Poirier wins that fight, especially if he does so in impressive fashion like he did the second time when they rematched in January, I think it would be a travesty. There's no one, in my opinion, who deserves it more than Dustin Poirier. And you can make a strong case that Dustin Poirier is, the uncrowned champ right now. I think he's fighting to, keep his #1 contender spot, not necessarily fighting for the #1 contender spot on July 10th. So, and then if Conor wins, yes, it gets a little tricky, but, who would deserve it? So Conor beats Dustin Poirier, and the way Poirier has looked as of late, who would deserve it more? I mean, Gaethje hasn't fought yet, and I know he's coming off a loss to Khabib, so that is not, like a huge knock on him. And then you have Beneil, who's taking time off. He said because his wife is going to give birth. There's RDA out there, but there's no other guy out there. And so Islam is fighting against Thiago Moises, but he's got some time to go. So to me, it's a no-brainer. I would call it a number one contender fight now, and all it does is raise the stakes and the the platform that they're fighting on and the interest in that fight. And so I would do it, but they haven't done that yet.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. I think that's the only move to make surrounding that fight. But what is the future of Conor McGregor? Because I think if anything that Charles Oliveira kind of shows, and this Michael Chandler Oliveira title fight shows, it's that UFC can move on. I mean, yes, we have a great trilogy fight between him and Poirier. Later this summer, it might be the biggest fight of the year. But we've seen like they've gone on for a year and longer without Conor. And now that there's so many players at 155, is his only turn to go to 170? Do you think his fighting future is kind of like on a leash here? Like, what do you think of Conor's future?
Well, I mean, obviously we have to see how it plays out, but he's still a massive draw. He's still, the biggest draw in the history of the game. He's still the biggest draw right now. Even if he loses to Dustin Poirier, I don't think, obviously he's not going to fight for the belt. There's going to be, I mean, in this day and age of like one-off fights and all that stuff, and he still will have several fights left on his UFC deal. It's not going to be a problem. Like one thing we've learned is that Conor could go away for 2 years. Conor could win one fight and then lose two and then win another one and be right back in that spot. Like when you're a draw of that caliber, when you make that much money for the company, you're going to be given preferential treatment. And it's not necessarily all that different than corporate America. The ones who bring in the money are the ones who get the opportunities. Now it's different than your regular sporting organization like the NBA or NFL, because that's a meritocracy. But in this game, it's completely different. So obviously a win on July 10th changes everything, but I'm not going to subscribe to the notion that a loss on July 10th is the end of his career. Far from it.
Oh, absolutely not. For me, trying to envision Conor competing in 4 years, it's kind of hard given how I feel like things are going to be moving in the division. And for me, another division that kind of lights up right now is one that we've seen a lot of talk of lately, and that's the heavyweight division. And I was very kind of surprised to hear Dana White go, all right, so we're moving away from Jon. Derek Lewis gets the fight, and Steve Bay's next. Like, why are we freezing Jon Jones out? Like, I don't know if you can make a clearer picture of it.
This is negotiations. This is the way it works. Trust me, they would do the Jon fight right now. They would make that fight happen in an hour if they could. But, I think that both sides aren't handling the negotiations well. I think doing it in public for Jon Jones isn't the right way to go. That is not how the UFC likes to do business. They don't respond well to that. And I don't know if the UFC is really, truly pushing. Look, the UFC is sitting back, making a boatload of money right now off pay-per-view for ESPN Plus, off TV deals all over the world. They're crushing it off sponsorship. Like the UFC is more profitable now than ever. And oh, by the way, not traveling for every single show has helped their bottom line as well. They don't have to necessarily go out there and make this fight with Jon Jones. The Derek Lewis fight is a solid plan B. It's not like you're picking up some scrub. Like Derek Lewis is very popular, and I think it's a fight that a lot of people would be down to see. And B, they don't necessarily have to come to, like, they're the ones making money right now. Jon Jones isn't. So without talking to Dana White, it's very clear to me that their line of thinking is, all right, when he's ready, he's going to come. When he's serious about cutting a deal here, he's going to come to us. We're not going to go chase him because then we lose our leverage. And so, I wouldn't read too much into that. That's just a part of negotiations. But I do believe him when he says we're willing to go to Derek Lewis next. And he is the front runner. He told me that. We've reported that he is the front runner, and it's a solid plan B, and that hurts Jon. The fact that there is a solid plan B, like in other cases when there hasn't been a solid plan B, there's more of an onus on the organization to make the fight. But in this regard, because there is a solid plan B, they can get away with it.
Now, we saw Jon kind of part ways with his old management team, and I don't know if that was strictly because of these negotiations or what, but do you believe that we see Jon fight for the heavyweight title in 2021?
Well, first of all, he was hardly working with them by the time they parted ways, so it had nothing to do with that. It just had never been made public that they were not really working with each other on the contracts. 2021, that's going to be tough. I mean, we're already getting, what are we, mid-May? Let's say Francis, it will be tough. I mean, right now, right this second, Derek is the front runner. And then would Francis come back, 3 months later? Crazier things have happened, but as every day passes, it's looking less and less likely.
You talked about the bottom line, and I want to talk about Tony Ferguson as well, but you talked about the bottom line with the UFC. We've seen so many things happen this year in these UFC pay-per-views. Dustin beats Conor. Rose Namajunas comes back, gets the belt. Francis wins the title. Jan Blachowicz wins the title. And then, Charles Oliveira this past weekend. Like, so many of the names maybe people don't recognize, or they're getting a shot at redemption, have grabbed titles, and not necessarily the most popular fighters. Otherwise, I think maybe George Masvidal does beat Kamaru Usman, who's continued to cement his legacy at 170. Is this a good thing for the UFC to have all these kind of, I don't want to call them upsets, because those of us who know the sport believe they're not upsets, but to have in the casual mindset, all these upsets and big fights kind of going the different way?
I mean, it's hard to group them all together. It depends on the fight, and it depends on who's the bigger draw. But honestly, the UFC is doing so well right now from a business standpoint. Nothing's really stopping them. Like, yeah, sure, sometimes you wish that you can script things like in pro wrestling so that a certain guy goes over. I'm sure deep down somewhere in their hearts they would admit that, but the UFC is on fire, and I think the relationship with ESPN has proven to be huge for them. I think that the rise of sports gambling has been huge for them, with DraftKings and FanDuel, and the way in which people consume UFC, and the way in which you can put your lineup and all that stuff. I'm not a big daily fantasy guy, but I know that it's just the perfect sport for it. You can pick your fighters and all that stuff. So I think all these things have helped them, and the fact that there's been some great fights and some great cards and all that stuff. I mean, it's all helped them. So I think that they're in a really good spot regardless of the results. And there's times when if Izzy would have won, it'd probably been better, but I don't think they're sweating any of that, to be honest.
Does Tony Ferguson fight again? I mean, I say this with all respect to Tony Ferguson, and I kind of heard it today with Misha Tate on Sirius XM. We have to warn Tony Ferguson that he's getting close to Joshua Fabia contacting him, and I do mean that in all due respect.
Tony has a great team around him. I don't think that's going to happen, but he's going to fight. He's going to fight again. Now, is it the smart thing to do? Should he take time off? Should he? That's on him. I mean, clearly we see what's going on, and he's not what he once was, and that's unfortunate. 3 losses in a row. Who'd have thought a year ago we'd be in this spot with him? But I'm pretty confident saying he's going to fight again.
One last thing I want to touch with you, Ariel, is I know you kind of covered it as she kind of rose into fame, and it's the Ronda Rousey storyline almost happening here in 2021. Kayla Harrison isn't ready for the UFC, Dana White said, and Kayla's now saying, I can't wait to prove Dana White wrong. I mean, do you believe, one, that Kayla Harrison will jump into the UFC, and just how could she be in the promotion?
Well, her contract is up this year, so at the end of this season for PFL. I feel like she's going to move on. I think she'll have suitors from Bellator, UFC, and even PFL is going to try to re-sign her, but I feel like she's going to move on. And of course, this is just my feeling. This is not from her. She's still under contract. And I think if I looked into a crystal ball, again, this is not me reporting this. This is me just giving opinion. I think that she will end up with the UFC because she's a very competitive person, and she wants to test herself against the best and eventually get that Amanda Nunes fight. So yes, this notion that she's not ready is ludicrous. This is, again, negotiation, Dana talk. You're gonna have to read between the lines. When you have, an organization that has people who are 1-0, I mean, there's, a ton of people who have way less experience than her. So this notion isn't that, I mean, it's just crazy. She is ready. She can make 145. 145 is still around technically. They can feed her a couple of fighters at 145, and then she'll be ready for Amanda Nunes, and what a massive fight that will be. So, I think she ends up there, and I think the world of her. I think she's an incredible fighter and only getting better and still quite raw. And of course, sometimes you're only as good as your competition. But I mean, anyone doubting a 2-time Olympic gold medalist is just, I mean, like the determination involved in getting those 2 gold medals, and the prep and the training and the drive and the motivation, like all that stuff is just superhuman. So.
Does it feel similar to when Ronda came into the UFC, the way Dana's kind of, and now I know when I read headlines, I'm just going to think negotiations 80% of the time, but does it feel similar?
No, because Dana was talking about a whole division as opposed to one person. And it was a division in the sense that he wasn't in business with that division, but they're buying Strikeforce and it was going to come over and all that. This one feels more particular to Kayla. Like that one had nothing to do with that one had nothing to do with Ronda in particular. So, this one is about Kayla, but it's about the negotiations with Kayla, if you get what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Well, Ariel, I always appreciate your time. I wish you all the best. And like I've said, they can catch you on ESPN on multiple, various shows that you do, DC and Helwani, the Helwani podcast, and Ariel and the Bad Guy. I know during pay-per-view weeks, you're on ESPN radio. Am I missing anything? Is there anything you want to plug?
No, man. Keep doing your thing. Thank you for having me. Thanks for reaching out. Always great to talk. And most importantly, go Knicks.
Absolutely. I cannot wait. I hope you're in the building for one of the games, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon, and I appreciate all your kind words.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Ariel.
Take care, bud.